Hi students, welcome to HSC Biology and Module 6, Genetic Change. This is video 15 and this time we're going to focus on artificial insemination. Our goal is to compare the processes and outcomes of reproductive technologies, including but not limited to artificial insemination. And you'll see this first part in a number of the different reproductive technologies that we're going to be looking at in this particular little mini-series of videos. So we want to make sure that you can describe the process of artificial insemination and explain how it works, and then to discuss some potential outcomes on populations of artificial insemination. And that can be both from a positive and a negative perspective. So artificial insemination, the other AI, is a simple technique which allows the injection of sperm containing semen into the female reproductive tract. There's a couple of different places where this may occur. It has particular relevance in the areas of animal husbandry, and so it's one of those techniques that's used very much to control and regulate breeding amongst particularly work animals and livestock, those that are going to be potentially used for things like wool, for meat and for milk. The idea is that we want to try and be a little bit selective about the offspring that we're going to produce, which means we need to look at focusing in on some of the favourable characteristics that might include disease resistance, that might include yields in terms of high milk or meat or wool production, or maybe it's the quality of the wool. So there's obviously a number of different characteristics that can be very important and that may differ from one agricultural practice to another. And so therefore there may be different things that different farmers are looking for in terms of what their most desired qualities are in the offspring of the particular animals that they're regulating. So that means that there may be a number of different specific things that they're looking for when they're looking at these types of reproductive technologies. Obviously, when we're using this kind of a method, it's a little bit hit and miss, so it's less precise. And when you're looking at evaluating each of these different types of reproductive technologies, then you want to have some of these important terms that you're using as part of your description. So artificial insemination is less precise. Obviously, one of the key things that we need to be aware of is the pedigrees of the parents involved. Because whilst we might be looking at particular genes that are the ones that code for things we want, we may also be looking at some potentially unfavourable characteristics that may also be passed on. So it's really important that we have these pedigrees, that we're able to look back in a couple of generations, see if there's any particular incidence of certain types of diseases or susceptibility to certain types of conditions that we may be increasing or not directly increasing, but increasing nonetheless as a result of our decisions around artificial insemination, selective breeding. Of course, there is also a potential downside to this, and that is if farmers are consistently using the same sperm donors, then the genetic diversity of the population will decrease. So this is another important consideration that we need to be aware of in any type of reproductive technology, and it's one of the things that we've talked about previously in terms of biodiversity, is that one consequence of the sorts of technologies that we're employing now is that we can reduce biodiversity. We can reduce the number of genes that are in the gene pool, or at least the incidence of various alleles within the gene pool, and as a result of that, we can affect genetic diversity. So it's very important that we maintain a kind of bank of donors rather than, for example, have one bull being a single sperm donor to a whole group of cows, for example. So this is one of the important considerations when you're thinking about artificial insemination and you're evaluating it in terms of how that process works, and also what the potential outcomes of the process are. We do need to think about things like genetic diversity. Now, artificial insemination is something that also happens in humans, and we know that there are fertility issues for a number of couples who are just not able to have children in a natural way. And so artificial insemination is one technique that can be used. We know that there's others. In vitro fertilization, for example, can be another reproductive technology used by humans to help address issues around fertility. The purpose of AI in humans, or the processes associated with AI in humans, is exactly the same as that for animal husbandry, and that is the introduction of sperm into either the cervix, so ICI if it's deposited near the cervix, or IUI if it's deposited directly into the uterus. Usually there's a slight difference in the treatment of the semen that's going to be introduced in either place, partly to provide the sperm with the best opportunity that they have to be able to, after they've been released, to find and fertilize the egg. So this is just a little bit of an overview here. In your booklets, you'll have some diagrams that show in a little bit more detail some of the mechanics associated with artificial insemination. It's just one of the many techniques that we have around reproductive technologies to help in the continuation of the species. And of course, like any of these technologies, it has both positive and negative aspects. Particularly good in either overcoming issues of infertility or overcoming or preferentially selecting characteristics that are favoured, but it does have those other issues associated with potentially reductions in biodiversity. This is just the first one. We'll move on to look at selective breeding in plants and look at the process there, which is kind of the parallel of artificial insemination, which is artificial pollination, but that'll be in the next video. Thanks for watching.